Hey, what's going on, guys? Little Bobby here, and today we're going to be talking about the Elite Four and how to beat them in Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. The Elite Four in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl is your last step to completing the story itself, and it's made up of 4 trainers who are basically type specialists just like gym leaders, except their teams have much stronger Pokemon than you've encountered in any gym so far. So what we're going to do is break down each trainer individually, the Pokemon they have, and the Pokemon that you can use to take them out the easiest. What you want to do, just as a general thing, is have every single one of your Pokemon be a minimum of level 65, if not higher, before you go into the Elite Four. You will find that the early few trainers in the Elite Four are going to be kind of in the low 50s, but you being that much higher of a level than they are is going to make it so that you're able to take out their Pokemon in one shot, which is going to save you in the long run on your heals, on your ether or elixirs that you're going to need to use. So you definitely want to make sure that you bring in a varied team that is at least level 65. And if you can do that, you're going to have a really solid shot at getting at least up to Cynthia, if not beating Cynthia herself. Before we get started, I want to let you guys in on my team or recommended Pokemon that you can bring. For me, I started with Torterra, and I do recommend having a strong grass type. There are a few of the trainers in the Elite Four that a strong grass type is really going to help you put in some work on their teams or specific Pokemons on their team. So when it comes to my recommended Pokemon, I do recommend a Staraptor with Intimidate, a Luxray with Intimidate, Torterra if possible, or another strong, relatively tanky grass type Pokemon, even better if it's a grass ground type. I also recommend a Mew or a Mr. Mime. You want a strong psychic type Pokemon that can learn Reflect and Light Screen. A strong ice type Pokemon is highly recommended for Cynthia's Garchomp, although not necessary, and we'll talk about that later. So you may want to bring that. And your last Pokemon can really be up to you. Having a strong water type is recommended for Flint. You can also bring a strong dark type. Make sure you do have Pokemon with dark type moves. Luxray is one of the recommendations I do recommend because it can learn the move Crunch, and you want to make sure that you have those dark type moves for a certain gym leader later on in the video. The first trainer that you're going to have to fight in the Elite Four is Aaron, and he is the Bugmaster of the Elite Four. His team consists of a Dustox at level 53, a Heracross at level 54, a Vespiquen at level 53, a Beautifly at level 53, and a Drapion at level 57. Now, when it comes to the strategies that you can use to get through this team, I highly recommend having a Staraptor. Staraptor is a great flying type Pokemon. He can do really great damage, and he's fast, so he's going to outspeed most if not all of these Pokemon, especially if you are at level 65. He should outspeed all of them. All you want to do is just spam that aerial ace attack if you have it. If not, Brave Bird will work, but you are going to take damage to yourself. So maybe if you have a berry, or if he has leftovers that you could put on him, that's going to be great. Personally, for me, I put a Sky Plate on him to increase his moves power. That made it easy to one-shot all these guys. Now, for Dustox, Heracross, Vespiquen, Beautifly, you can hit those aerial ace attacks, but Drapion is a Poison Dark. He is not a bug type, so you're going to need to switch it up. And for me, what I did was use my Torterra, but you can use any strong rock or ground Pokemon that knows the move Earthquake. And if you use Earthquake and your Pokemon is high enough leveled, you're going to one-shot or maybe two-shot the Drapion. The biggest thing about being over-leveled for these first battles, remember, is that you want to A, outspeed all of these trainers, B, one-shot them, and C, make sure that you have enough items when you get to Cynthia, because she is the one that you really need to be worried for. The second trainer in the Elite Four is Berthia, and she is a rock and ground master trainer. She is going to bring some heavy hitters, but nothing to be worried about if you have a strong grass Pokemon on your side. Again, I picked Torterra, so this was super lucky for me. Her Pokemon are a Quagsire at level 55, a Hippowdon at level 59, a Sudowoodo at level 56, a Whiscash at level 55, and a Golem at level 56. Now, if you do have a Torterra and you manage to find the Meadow Plate, you're going to be in luck, because if you slap that on and you just hit these guys with strong grass moves, they're going to go down really, really easily. Some of them have double weakness to grass, so if you've got that, you are in the money. If not, I hope you caught a strong grass type, maybe Rosa Raid along the way, something like that, that you can use to chew through your team pretty quickly. And if you do, it's not going to be too much trouble. This was actually the least worrisome trainer for me, because I had Torterra, but also because it just seemed like these Pokemon were ones that were more set up to go down easier, with the exception of Hippowdon, who has a lot of defense. You can basically go to town as long as you have Torterra or another strong grass Pokemon and tear through her team really fast. The third trainer for the Elite Four is Flint, and by his name and the fact that he tells you he's a Fire Master trainer early on, you'd think, oh, he's going to have a full fire team. That's where you're wrong. You're actually going to need to have a fairly varied team to beat Flint, and the first time I faced him, which is going to be some of the footage you see here, he hit me with one of these strategies that they must have added to the AI, because this was like a competitive strategy that I'd never seen any Pokemon AI do anything like this, and it threw me for such a loop. But first we'll talk about his team, and then we'll talk about the things to look out for. Now, his team is going to include a Rapidash at level 58, an Infernape at level 61, a Steelix at level 57, a Lopunny at level 57, and a Driftblim at level 58. So, from what you can see, not only does he have some fire types in Rapidash and Infernape, he has a steel type with Steelix, a normal type with Lopunny, and a ghost flying with Driftblim. So, one of the things you need to watch out for, and this is one of the things that got me on my first run, it cost me so many revives, recover items, things like that, is the Driftblim might use Minimize, and once it does, it gets harder to hit, and then it might use it again if you don't kill it quick enough. His Driftblim managed to survive several hits and use Minimize 4 times, and then it used Baton Pass to Infernape, because those are the only 2 Pokemon that it had left. Now, fortunately, I did have Mew on my team, so Infernape actually was not able to kill Mew in one hit, but I wasn't able to hit him with Psychic, which would have taken him down super fast, especially as he was lowering his attack and defense with some of his attacks. Now, the thing that you also need to watch out for is Lopunny. Having a normal type, where you haven't really had to have too much of a need for fighting, she can be kind of a wall, because if you have other typed moves like fire and grass and water, psychic, things like that, I don't generally carry a fighting Pokemon with me, but if you are over leveled to the point where you're, say, level 65, 8 levels above this Lopunny, you're going to take it out relatively quickly. You're just probably not going to one-shot it. The Driftblim, you want to either have an ice or electric Pokemon to take that thing out quick, because you do not want it setting up and leading to the Infernape. The only reason I even survived that Infernape Baton Pass strategy, which was so good, was because my Mew, I taught it Reflect, and it had, I had Heals and I had Life Water, I think it is, or Life Dew, excuse me. I had the Life Dew move, and that Life Dew move saved me for so long that he basically ran out of attacks that could really hurt Mew and my other Pokemon too much. That being said, make sure you have a strong ground move, ideally that isn't Torterra, but you can pull out Torterra on Steelix, and that shouldn't be a problem. I had Luxray, so that was my electric type I used for Driftblim. Lopunny, I just kind of had to power through. That was one of the few Pokemon in the whole thing that I couldn't 1 or 2 shot. And then Rapidash and Infernape, I just hit with water and psychic type attacks, and they were done. So you can do that, but you're already starting to see how this Elite Four is really powerful, and they really kind of throw you off your game. It's not like the earlier Elite Fours where they might have one Pokemon that's like a little outside of the typing. These guys start really challenging you here. The last member of the Elite Four is Lucian, and he is the Psychic Master Trainer of the Elite Four. He does use all Psychic Pokemon, so Dark and Ghost Pokemon are going to be really great options. His team consists of a Mr. Mime, Girafarig, Medicham, Alakazam, and Bronzong. And the Mr. Mime is the real challenge here, at least it was for me, because I had my Rapidash, which had Smart Strike, which is a steel move, but I didn't get that same type attack bonus, so it didn't really take him down. And after that, he uses Reflect, or he can use Light Screen. And if he uses those, you're going to have a really hard time 2 or even 3-shotting him. It might take you 4 to 5 shots, at which point he can use his very powerful Psychic attack and take your health down quite a bit, even if you have Pokemon that are fairly strong against Psychic Pokemon. However, one of the benefits of him throwing up Reflect or Light Screen is going to be that once you do take him out, you're going to be on turn 4 or 5, and that move is finally going to wear off. So once you get to the next Pokemon, he might be a little easier than the Mr. Mime was. For me, because my Torterra knew Crunch, a dark type move, I basically could plow through almost every one of these except for Medicham. Medicham, I did pull out Staraptor again to hit him with Aerial Ace, because that's a flying move, and since Medicham is also part fighting on top of being psychic, he is weak to flying moves. Other than that, if you have Crunch on any of your Pokemon, and it is a very common move, that's going to be the Pokemon to throw out so long as they are not weak to psychic type. Some strong Pokemon that you might already be using that have the ability to learn Crunch, that may have already learned it, would be Gyarados, Torterra, or Luxray. Those are 3 Pokemon that I carried through my adventure. I did not use Gyarados on my Elite Four fight or my fight with Cynthia, but I did have Luxray and Torterra who knew Crunch, and because they are strong physical attackers and most Psychic Pokemon do not have strong physical defense, they were able to one-shot or maybe two-shot all of these Pokemon with Crunch. So all you need to do is make sure you have 1 or 2 of those Pokemon on your team, just to make sure you've got those dark type moves on those Pokemon, and you should make it through Lucian pretty easily after you get through the Mr. Mime. Again, if Mr. Mime is weak to poison, so that might be a good option, especially if you have a Pokemon that has a poison move but is not a poison type, so it doesn't take damage from his very powerful psychic attack. Once you made it this far, you have the Pokemon champion Cynthia. Cynthia has a very, very, very powerful team with a great mix and variety. One thing about it is that she does have a couple Pokemon that are weak to grass, which is great. Except one of them has a move that's going to throw us off. And we're going to talk about all of these real quick. But her team starts at level 60. She has a Spirit Tomb at level 61, a Gastrodon at level 60, a Melodic at level 63, a Rosa Raid at level 60, a Lucario at level 63, and a Garchomp at level 66. Now, everyone knows about Cynthia's Garchomp. We're going to talk very in depth about that in just a few minutes. But let's talk about strategies for these other Pokemon. Again, I picked Torterra or Turtwig at the beginning, and now I have a Torterra. So fortunately for Gastrodon, that's a one-shot, easy win. Especially because he's got that 4 times weakness. Cynthia is always going to lead with Spiritomb, and Spiritomb is a very hard Pokemon to fight because it is a dual Ghost Dark type, meaning its only weakness is Fairy. And Fairy is not the easiest Pokemon type to find, and not the easiest move to have. In my first run, what I did was I taught Dazzling Gleam to Mew, and that ended up working out for that. But in my first run, I also failed beating Cynthia as a whole, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So Spiritomb for me, what I ended up doing on my final successful run was just putting my Torterra out there, hitting the Spiritomb with Earthquake just for as much damage as I could possibly get out, because my Torterra was my highest leveled Pokemon, and I knew it could tank the most damage from Spiritomb. So once I did that, got through that, it was pretty easy. Now, you may use whatever you want here on Spiritomb, but it's definitely worth it to probably use one of your strongest Pokemon with the hardest hitting moves that it has, because unless you have a fairy type with very strong moves and a lot of defense, you're gonna have a rough time with Spiritomb any way you look at it. Now, for me, she would always send out Gastrodon next, and Gastrodon again is a dual water ground type with a grass Pokemon that is an easy one-hit KO as long as you are level 65 or higher. I think I used Giga Drain after Spiritomb to get some of my HP back on Torterra, so that might be a great option for you. After that, she always came out with Melodic, and this was one of the first problem Pokemon that I encountered when it came to Cynthia. Melodic has some really great moves that allow it to kind of be a wall, like the first wall in her team. So not only does it have Recover, which is going to heal all its Pokemon, it's carrying a Flame Orb. So it's hard for you to set any status on it, like Paralyze or Sleep. Remember too that all of these Elite Four members are going to have full restores, so you want to be sure you're prepared for that. But she does have that Flame Orb, which is going to cause a burn status on Melodic, and that means you can't paralyze or put Melodic to sleep, right? So one of my strategies when Melodic came out was to immediately throw out Luxray and hit it with Thunder Wave, because my Luxray, when I finally did beat Cynthia, was faster than the Melodic, and that allowed me to get off Thunder Wave so that it couldn't burn itself, and I always got the chance to go first. Now, the reason I don't use Torterra is because her Melodic, of course, knows Ice Beam. So if you throw out Torterra against this Melodic, it is going to one-shot you even up to maybe 4 or 5 levels higher because of the 4 times weakness. Personally, I would recommend pulling out an electric type, one maybe that has Thunder Wave, but one that definitely has some strong electric attacks. I used my Luxray with Spark. That did the trick. It did take a couple of turns though. Fortunately, because I had high friendship, even if she did end up burning me with the Scald move that she has, Luxray would heal himself, and if you've been training your Pokemon for a long time, that's definitely the team that you want to bring in, because they're going to help you out a lot, evading attacks, getting critical hits, and healing their own status conditions. After Melodic, she would bring out Rosa Raid, and because it was a dual grass poison, I brought out Mew and hit it with Mew's attack Psychic. That attack would one-shot Rosa Raid. It does not have great special defense, so it went down really easily. I would recommend highly that you have a strong Psychic Pokemon. If you don't have the save data to get Mew early on in the game, which Mew is a lifesaver we'll talk about in just a minute, you definitely want to bring in something like Mr. Mime in order to make sure that you have a strong Psychic Pokemon specifically for Cynthia and her team. Now, after Rosa Raid, she would bring out Lucario, and Lucario was a nightmare to fight. The first time I fought her, this Pokemon was the one that ended it all. In the first 2 times I challenged Cynthia, I did it once, started the save over, did it again, both times ended on Lucario. But after I went in past level 65, I would keep the Mew out and just hit it with Psychic, because Mew also on my team had Reflect, and because Mew can learn any move, you can really customize him any way you want. His attack and special attack are pretty good, his defense and special defense are pretty good, so he's a great all-around Pokemon to have with you during this fight. Now, with Lucario, he does have a lot of strong attacks, but all of them are physical, so if you throw up Reflect, he is not going to be able to do that much damage to you, right? And that's what you want to do. You want to limit that, and it's going to be a strategy for her last Pokemon that we see as well. So make sure you're throwing up Reflect. If you do have a strong fire type, because Lucario is part steel, you could bring that out too, but I would still recommend having Mew out to throw out Reflect first so you can get those fire attacks out and not take full damage from Lucario's very powerful physical attacks. Now, the final Pokemon on Cynthia's team is the Nightmare, her Garchomp. And this is a ground dragon type. I actually trained up a Glalie for something like 30 levels. It was over level 70 when I did this, but I never even ended up using it against Garchomp because a friend of mine gave me a great strategy that we're going to talk about now. So, my friend had a Staraptor and a Luxray, both of which had Intimidate. And he brought a bunch of revives, as you should do with the Elite Four battle the first time, especially against Cynthia. And what he did was, he would put out his Luxray first and let it use its ability Intimidate, and then he would immediately just switch to Staraptor that he had that also had the ability Intimidate. Now I was doing the same thing, except only my Staraptor had Intimidate. So it was kind of breaking even, because every time I would get 2 of those out with Staraptor, he would use Swords Dance. At least his attack wasn't going up. But if you do this with 2 Pokemon with Intimidate, you're going to be able to live Garchomp's hits, because he has such a crazy high attack power that he can one-shot almost any Pokemon, regardless of the type, if he gets set up, especially if he starts using Swords Dance. So the footage you'll see here is my final winning battle. I'm going to speed through and cut out a lot, because a lot of it was literally just me switching back and forth between Staraptor and Luxray, getting those 2 Pokemon, reviving them, and then putting them out, trying to hit them, or trying to hit that Intimidate ability to lower his attack, and then him maybe after 2 or 3 times of that using Swords Dance to buff his attack more. It's just a whole thing. You'll see a big chunk of this removed. Funny enough, after a while, I had an idea, and I just went for it, and I threw out Mew. And Mew was the savior of the whole run, because after she had knocked out, and I was starting to knocked out Staraptor and Luxray so many times, I was really starting to get low on revives. Mew I threw out, and he was able to live a hit. And because he was able to live a hit, I was able to put off an X defense, which I brought with me to bring up his defense, and he was able to live more hits, taking even less damage. Then I threw up Reflect, and this Garchomp that normally can one-shot anything was doing maybe 1/5 of the health of my Mew, and my Mew was able to hit its very powerful Psychic attack, because I believe it was level 68 while her Garchomp is 66, and it was taking 1/3 of its health. And so she did have full restores, I had full restores still, so it became this battle of Mew versus Garchomp, and it ended up, at the end of the day, Mew ended up winning out, because it had Reflect, I had an X defense, and I had Psychic, and Mew's Psychic attack is extremely strong. So I would highly recommend doing that if you don't have a very, very powerful Ice Pokemon. I knew Glalie was not going to outspeed Garchomp, and it was probably going to die in 1 hit, and so I took a shot with Mew. It ended up working out. If you have the Mew from the beginning, I would highly recommend that you bring that thing into the Elite Four, because it could save your run like it did mine, especially because you can teach it any move you want in order to have it help you through any one of these trainers. And you could even do that mid-run, like, so if you equip Dazzling Gleam, or excuse me, if you equip like a poison move like Toxic or something to deal with Mr. Mime on Lucian, and then after that you want to teach it Dazzling Gleam to deal with Spiritomb, you can do that. But overall, that's it. I would recommend really bringing a Fairy type or some powerful Ice type Pokemon. Abomasnow is a good option if you can train it up to be a high enough level, because it is fairly tanky. And it has some good ice moves, even though it is more of a physical attacker. You could still use the physical ice moves and kind of do the dirty to Garchomp as quick as you can. I would absolutely, though, recommend having a Pokemon with Reflect and bringing X defense, because this Garchomp and even Lucario, they are so tough. You want to make sure that you have as much physical defense as possible when you're fighting them. So that's it. That's the kind of walkthrough / guide on the Elite Four and Cynthia. That's my tips that I have that I can give to you guys. If you enjoyed this video and you made it this far, please remember to like and subscribe. Comment down below. Let me know what team did you use to beat the Elite Four and Cynthia, if you beat them already, or if you watched this video, did you use any of the Pokemon that I recommended? I just want to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.